Hello and welcome back to Six Sense CEO. My name is Sam and I will be your host today and every day of this podcast. When I first started this show, even though the title is Six Sense CEO, I realized that life and business are so deeply intertwined that I couldn't do just a lifestyle podcast or just a business podcast. I really had to do both. So that's really what this show is about. And today we have a topic that I'm super thrilled to talk about, which is self-love. Self-love is something that affects both your personal and professional life. And it's something that I have learned probably the hard way over the past few years that I've run my business. And I have certain practices that help me cultivate deeper love for myself. And the past few weeks, I've actually been traveling a lot. So I've fallen out of my normal routine, and it was kind of like a slap in the face and realizing I need to get back into my routine and prioritizing my self-love practices and making sure that I'm making decisions that make me feel good and make me happy. But oh my gosh, the last few weeks have been crazy, so I will just tell you about it first. So I flew back to Florida to see my family for a couple of weeks, and my boyfriend actually came to Pensacola, which is my hometown, and he met my family for the very first time, so that was interesting, to say the least. I'm like kind of kidding. He did a good job. My family loved him. So, everything's good. But I always feel like that first time that your significant other is meeting your family is a little bit nerve-wracking. It definitely was for me. But then after that, my boyfriend came back here to California, and I actually went to Orlando, which is, I had to get on a plane to get there. If you were driving, it would take 7 hours, so I just decided to fly. So got on a plane, flew to Orlando, and I actually represented my client at a conference there. So it was a whole other nerve-wracking thing, but that also went well. And then I got on another plane and flew back here to California, and here I am. I have been back for 2 days, and I'm still just trying to get back into the swing of things. But I thought now would be a great time to really introduce my self-love practices and talk more about some of the ways that I take care of myself and love myself and build a beautiful life for myself. So today we're going to talk about how self-love influences both business and personal growth. And as always, I'm going to be sharing lots of tips for you, personal stories, anecdotes, things to really help you make connections to the concepts I'm sharing. So let's dive right in. So at its core, self-love is really just about appreciating yourself. It's deeply rooted in a sense of self-worth and compassion for yourself. So this can look like a lot of things. Like, let's say you make a mistake, and I make them all the time in my business. So whenever I make a mistake, and instead of beating myself up or saying, oh, Samantha, you're so stupid, you're so dumb, how could you do that? Having compassion for yourself shows that you love yourself enough to give yourself grace whenever things don't go as planned or you do something that you regret. Self-love is really a state of being that supports your psychological, emotional, and spiritual growth. People who have a strong sense of self-love treat themselves like they're worthy of their desires, and they treat themselves with respect. And that's not something that I've always done. And I'll give you an example. This is a really personal one, but that's what this podcast is all about. So let's get into it. Whenever I first went to college, I had a really low sense of self-worth. I didn't really love myself in the way that I should. And because of that, I really sought a lot of validation from men. I always wanted a man to be pining after me. I always wanted a man to be chasing me. I was literally a pick-me girl. And I'm laughing a little bit when I'm saying that because that's just who I was at the time. I had no self-worth. I put all of my sense of worth based on what men thought of me. I ended up in this toxic relationship with someone who, we broke up a while back. I still have respect for him, so I'm not going to speak negatively about my ex, but he was my first boyfriend. We didn't have a healthy relationship, and I stayed for way too long in that situation because I just wanted someone to love me, and I didn't respect myself, and I stayed with someone who wasn't treating me well just because I felt like I needed to be loved. And unfortunately, those actions led to bad consequences because there was a girl I was friends with in high school and the first year of college, but then one day she decided she didn't want to be my friend anymore because she didn't like that I kept staying with this guy who wasn't treating me well. And so she dumped me as a friend. And that was one of multiple instances in my life where other people have not had patience for me not having self-love or a sense of self-worth for myself. And I understand that now, but back then, that felt like a slap in the face. It felt like someone who didn't care about me or didn't love me. And part of that, I think, is true, because I think that this is someone who should have had more patience with me than she did. But at the root of it, what bothered her was that I didn't love myself. And she wanted to, I guess, be around people who did have a sense of self-worth, which, I mean, I won't get too much into this because I don't want to speak negatively about anyone, but that was the situation. And I just want to unpack this a little bit more because I think we all have our insecurities, right? I'm not at all saying that it's not okay to be insecure or it's not okay to see flaws in yourself or to feel bad about yourself, because those are all things that we all go through at some point in our life, right? But self-love is not about necessarily viewing yourself as perfect either. It's about having a balanced, positive view of yourself that coexists with your healthy relationships, with doing things that will better your life. It's really about making sure that you're in situations that are better for you and not worse for you. And the situation I shared with my ex-boyfriend who wasn't treating me well is a perfect example of that. So if you are in an unhealthy relationship, then remember this story, because this is something that I think you should take away from this episode. When you love yourself, you don't want to be in that toxic relationship. You don't want to be around the people who are constantly battling themselves and constantly putting themselves down, or even people who just have a really crazy sense of self-deprecating humor. Now, I think some of that is okay. I think it's just a sense of humor that it's not all bad. But whenever you're constantly putting yourself down, that energy is very exhausting to be around. And at this point, some people might sit here and ask, well, isn't self-love like just being selfish and constantly thinking of yourself and not thinking of anyone else? And I want to make a clear distinction that that's not true, because loving yourself is really about having respect for yourself, not always being self-centered, okay? There's a big difference. And I do think that it is okay to be self-centered to an extent, because you should look out for yourself and you should want to better yourself. But self-love isn't about only thinking of yourself and not thinking of others. And whenever people who don't believe in self-love talk about it, they might say, oh, that's a narcissist. And I want to kind of refute that point by talking a little bit about narcissistic personality disorder, which is what that term narcissist comes from, right? So whenever we're talking about narcissists, we should be very mindful of the fact that that's actually a personality disorder that is diagnosable, and that shouldn't be compared to self-love. Because the thing about narcissistic personality disorder, if we're talking about it in terms of psychology, that's like extreme self-centeredness, really lack of empathy or understanding for others, and constantly doing things for yourself, even when it comes at the expense of other people's feelings or lives even. I have met some people who are like that, and let me tell you that loving yourself has nothing to do with that. So don't think for a minute that just because you love yourself, you're a narcissist or whatever. People who say that don't know what they're talking about. Okay, so I've yapped for long enough about what self-love is. So let's talk about how it relates to business, because I bet you're wondering that by now. So just think about it for a second. If you truly have a strong sense of self-worth and you truly love yourself, that is going to trickle down into your business and help you have strong mental clarity, make better decisions, and make decisions, more importantly, that are going to grow the business. So I have a great example of this, and this is an important one, especially if you're in your first years of business, because whenever you're in your first year of business, you're not going to want to charge that same amount as you would in your fifth year of business, because once you reach that level of experience, you're going to want to charge more. But if you don't have a strong sense of self-worth, if you don't love yourself and believe in yourself and understand the value of the services you're providing, then you're going to find every reason possible to not want to raise your prices. You'll say, oh, well, the client probably can't afford that, or you'll just make up these reasons in your head and you'll self-sabotage in that moment. And that will prevent you from raising your prices, which is what you should do because you have 5 years of experience at that point. Because here's the thing, self-love leads to increased confidence, which makes you more assertive in business. And whenever you run a business, I mean, sometimes it is a little bit cutthroat, and I hate to say it because that's not how I like to think of my business at all. But you have to be assertive, you have to know your worth, and you have to have firm boundaries on what is acceptable and what's not in terms of client conduct, payment schedules, all these things are important to have clarified and be firm on. And when you love yourself, it helps you do all of that. But most importantly, and this is the aspect of self-love that has helped me the most in my business, whenever you love yourself, you manage stress a lot better. Because I'll use the example of making a mistake in business. Maybe you make a mistake and it costs you an account and you lose the client. This is something that has happened to me. It's happened to probably almost every business owner out there. So in that situation, you can feel really, really bad about your part in making this mistake or, whatever happened. So in that case, you have one of two options. You can either put yourself down, say, how could I do that? I'm so stupid. I'm so dumb. Or you could say, hey, I'm a human. I made a mistake and I'm going to give myself grace for that. I'm going to allow myself to be human. I'm going to have compassion for myself. And the outcome of that situation is going to depend on how you handle it. Because if you're constantly putting yourself down and saying, oh, why me? Why me? How could I do this? Then it's going to make it a lot harder for you to bounce back, and you're going to be slower at bouncing back because you're constantly putting yourself down, But if you are positive and you give yourself the grace to be human and you give yourself the space to heal from that situation and heal those emotions that you're feeling, you're going to be able to bounce back stronger a lot faster. And that's why cultivating self-love and really doing the work to love yourself more deeply will help you manage those setbacks better. And finally, being a leader requires you to love yourself deeply, because whenever you love yourself, you know who you are, what you're doing, the value you offer, you know your worth, and that helps you lead with a lot of authenticity and integrity. Because if you don't know who you are and you don't have clarity on yourself or what your worth is, it becomes a lot harder to lead assertively and to really show up and have a presence as a leader. So that, my friends, is why self-love is important to have as a business owner. And if you don't agree, leave me a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, DM me on Instagram. I would love to debate this with you and chat more. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the practical applications of self-love, meaning things you could actually do to better love yourself and incorporate self-love into your daily life. So one thing I love to do is to get into a meditative state and connect with God, connect with Source, let God lead me through the situations that I'm working through, because every time I close my eyes and I meditate and I imagine myself connecting to Source, I feel a sense of relief. I feel like God is leading me in the right direction and everything makes sense. And this is something that it's hard to explain on a podcast episode, because it's something you just have to experience for yourself. And I highly recommend that you have some sort of practice to connect with God, connect with Source, the universe, whatever you believe in, the higher power out there, and really gain a deeper sense of understanding of your place in the world and what you're doing and what your purpose is. So another thing that a lot of people talk about is speaking affirmations, writing them in your journal and stuff like that. That I find incredibly boring. I just can't get into it. But one thing I do is listen to subliminals. So what subliminals are, I'll just use affirmations as an example because most of them do have affirmations in them. So it's like affirmations put into an audio and sped up so fast that your conscious mind can't understand what it's saying. So these subliminals work by engaging your subconscious mind. But even if your conscious mind doesn't know what the subliminal is saying, your subconscious mind will pick up on it and it will help to rewire how you actually view yourself. So I love listening to subliminals whenever I'm getting ready in the morning. There are a bunch of them you can search up on YouTube. And I just like to do my makeup while listening to ones that say, I am beautiful, I am awesome. Like, I actually don't know what they say because I don't really look at it, but there are ones you can look up and help rewire those beliefs about yourself in your subconscious mind. So another aspect of self-love, which is something that people talk about all the time, is setting boundaries. And I think that even though setting boundaries is incredibly important, I don't want you to get turned off by it, because some people, I think, just think it sounds like therapists speak and they don't actually fully grasp the importance of this. But one example, I'll just use a business example here as it relates to self-love, is like, let's say you invoice your clients every month and the same day of the month, and they have a certain period to pay. So you agree upon that the invoice is going to be paid within that period, but they're constantly weeks and weeks and weeks late on the invoice, which has happened to me as a business owner. So having this boundary in place and knowing your worth and knowing that clients need to respect your payment schedule is all coming down to your sense of self-love and self-worth. Because if you're just like, oh, well, it's okay, and you constantly make excuses for them, that really signals that you don't truly value yourself, because you're constantly letting these things slip that are actually putting you in a bad financial situation because you're not getting the invoice paid when it needs to and you don't have healthy cash flow. But if you have self-worth, if you love yourself, then you will take the actions that you need to take in order to prevent this from happening. You'll follow up with the client, you'll ask for the payment in a professional way. You will even maybe implement a late fee, and that's just a suggestion. It's not something I've actually done in my business, but that's a way that you can make sure you're going to get paid on time, because people don't want to pay extra fees, These are all things you can do that show that you value yourself. You got to prioritize your needs, because something so silly as a client not paying you on time for the money that they owe you, you just can't let that happen, mama. So self-care, the way I see it, is a form of self-love. And this is important because when you take care of yourself, you're able to perform better. And I just want to backtrack for a second, because taking care of yourself should not be a means to perform better only. You should take care of yourself because you love yourself and you want to, And if you don't feel like you want to take care of yourself, then you need to do more work on self-love, because you should want to love yourself. You should want yourself to thrive. You should want to take care of yourself and make yourself feel good. That's what this is all about, So some self-care activities I love doing are going to the gym. And, I love talking about this because my boyfriend and I have very different approaches of going to the gym. He's very much like they're getting angry at himself almost, but he tells me that getting angry at himself and pushing himself to like his limit is the way that he motivates himself to get jacked. And like for me, I respect that. If it works for him and he likes it, then that's fine. But for me, I go to the gym and I like to have positive self-talk and empower myself, rather than saying, you're fucking weak and you can't do it. I don't even know what he says to himself, but just stuff like that, I like to go to the gym and say, you got this, girl. You're strong, you're a bad bitch. I like to give myself positive self-talk and uplift myself. And I think that's such a important thing, especially if you're a woman, to approach it that way rather than putting yourself down, because that'll truly help you thrive in that environment in the gym, which is male dominated anyway. Another self-care activity that I love to do is taking an everything shower. So what this is, and if you're on TikTok, you probably already know, but basically it's like when you go in the shower and you do absolutely everything, like all your self-care activities, you shave, exfoliate, wash your hair, do your full like hair wash routine, which in my case, it involves oiling my hair, washing it twice. I always do a double wash, conditioning it, doing a hair mask. Like that's a whole ordeal, right? So the everything shower may in fact take like 2 hours, but that's something that I block out in my week every single week, because it helps me feel good about myself and prepare for the upcoming week and make sure that I'm looking and feeling my best. I would love to talk more about my favorite products and like beauty practices and things like that if you're interested, but usually it just involves like skincare, doing a self-tan, like, I have a little routine down pat. And actually, I'm probably going to add some more stuff to it just because I love doing my little beauty routines and doing my makeup every day too. Okay, I don't do it every single day, but on a lot of days, especially now, I do, because it just helps me show up better during my day. So at this point, you're probably thinking, Sam, you're making all of this sound easy. You make loving yourself sound easy, but I don't love myself and it's hard. And let me tell you, I came from a place that was very similar to that. I struggled with self-love a lot when I was growing up. And I think that part of it was I didn't really learn it from the figures in my life. And that's not speaking badly about my family at all, or saying that they didn't take care of me, because they were the best family. Let me tell you, like I was raised by a single dad and my grandparents, and they were all I could ask for. But when I was growing up, I think, my family's great, but they're also very hard on themselves. And I saw that as I was growing up. And I think it made it harder for me to cultivate a sense of self-love about myself. And so, especially when I became a teenager and young adult, I really struggled with self-love, and I fell into an eating disorder, an ED, and that was very difficult for me to work through because I constantly was telling myself, you're not skinny enough, you're not beautiful enough, these boys don't like you because you look like this and not like that. And it was just this constant negative dialogue that I actually went and did group therapy for. And that was a really cool experience that helped me kind of process those emotions. But I really cultivated a stronger sense of self-love when I started working out and just being a more positive person overall, having more positive self-talk versus negative self-talk, telling myself that I'm beautiful and intelligent and a good person, and just trying to have that dialogue more so than the negative, like, you should do better type dialogue. And all of that work that I've done over the years, and I'm not quite done, by the way, it's really a lifelong journey. I don't expect to actually complete my self-love journey. It's something that's going to carry with me through the rest of my life. And it's just a continuous project, and that's probably how it's going to be for you too. But one thing that I can think of business related that my self-love helped me a lot with was I had this really toxic client, and I actually worked with them for a while. So I was in this like toxic situation for a while, and my team was involved too. And, it was affecting them, not just me. So I'm going to talk about this from my perspective, but they were also affected. And I don't want to speak for them, but in my case, like, this client was really damaging my mental health, and they were just bullying me all the time, for lack of a better term. They were being mean and constantly just demanding more and more and more from me, even things that weren't in our contract that they hadn't paid for, they were demanding from me. And when I really stood up for myself and put myself down, or not put myself down, put my foot down, that was an act of self-love. That was me saying, no, you are not going to step all over me. I'm prioritizing my needs. I'm doing what is best for me and my business and my team, and I'm going to walk away. And I terminated their contract, and that was it. And this was the type of client that whenever I threatened to let them go, or not really threatened, I shouldn't say it like that, but I would say in a nice way, if we're not meeting your needs, you should consider going and looking for another company to help you. And that was my nice way of saying, like, you're clearly not happy. We want to help you succeed, but we're not meeting your needs clearly, so you should go find someone else to work with. That's not really like threatening to let them go, but that was more like me just saying, hey, this isn't working out. But every time I did that, they would constantly say, oh no, you're doing a great job, like everything's good, we're just voicing our concerns or whatever. But these people were being like really terrible to me. They called me names. They said things that were intended to hurt me and not constructive feedback at all. So that was the type of situation this was. And I don't want to get too specific about it because this is not trash talking anyone or trying to disrespect anyone. I'm just speaking about my experience from my perspective. But anyways, I terminated this client's contract, and instantly I felt a sense of relief from the whole situation because finally I had done something to prioritize myself and something that was going to help me move forward, and I was cutting loose this thing that was holding me back. So if you're in a similar situation, you have a client who is not treating you well, or they're toxic, or things just aren't working out, it doesn't even have to be as dramatic of a situation as the one that I mentioned, but maybe it's just not a good fit and you just feel like the situation is holding you back, like, feel free to let that client go, okay? And especially in professional situations, it's not something that should be personal, okay? It's something that you should make a decision to better the business and better your mental health and your well-being, but it's not something that, even if the client's upset or it hurts their feelings, it's all just business, you know what I mean? So you shouldn't ever feel bad for doing something just to improve your situation or your well-being or help your business move forward. So I've given a lot of examples of how self-love can affect your business, but now I want to share how you can actually incorporate these suggestions into your life. So I gave a few concrete examples of self-love practices like mindfulness, meditation, journaling, even is a good one as well. That's something that I personally love doing. Connecting with God, exercising, anything that's going to make you feel good and improve your sense of self-worth could be considered an act of self-love. So whenever you're incorporating these things into your life, it's okay to start small. You don't have to overhaul your whole routine just to make yourself feel worthy or whatever, right? I know a lot of creators online will say, oh, here's my morning routine or here's my self-care routine. And it's like this 50-step process that you're like, wow, that's so inspiring and cool. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? To each their own, but you don't have to have a 50-step self-care routine, okay? You can start small and do one or two new things that are going to help you feel better about yourself. That is perfectly okay. Sometimes I feel like the internet is just a huge circle jerk of, people's egos and who could do the best or the coolest or the most it girl thing, right? But it's not really about that. That's not what self-care and self-love should be about. It's all very individualized, and it's something that you should just consider what is going to work the best for you, and that's it. So it's okay to start small, but remember that consistency is key. And this is something that, as I mentioned, I need to do a better job at, because usually whenever I go on a trip or I get out of my normal routine, I just completely fall out of the whole thing. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, but it's something that I want to improve upon and make sure that whenever I'm traveling, I'm still taking care of myself and incorporating little moments of self-love into my day. And I think a lot of this stems from perfectionism too. I am a recovering perfectionist. So if, for example, I can't do my whole self-care routine, sometimes I'm like, oh darn, well, it's just not even worth it. I just won't do it at all, which is not a good mindset to have, because even if you don't do all 8 steps of your routine, you can still do 5 or 6. You know what I mean? You can still incorporate self-care and self-love into your day, even if you can't commit to the whole routine that you have planned out. It's more important to be consistent with certain habits, even if you're not perfect with it. Because if you completely just fall off the wagon, then you're not really getting the benefits of your routine at all. So remember those 2 things. It's okay to start small, just be consistent, and you will get the results that you're looking for. It may not be an instant thing. It might take weeks or months to really reap these benefits, or I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but to really start to feel better about yourself and feel like you finally love yourself. That may be a long process depending on what you're working through, if there's trauma there or other things. But if you decide to do this, like, it may be helpful to get the help of a mental health professional if you're working through something that you feel like you just need extra support with, or it's something that's very difficult to work through on your own. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. So just remember that. I went to group therapy whenever I was struggling with my ED and my body image issues, and that helped me tremendously. It gave me new tools in my toolkit to work through the things I was feeling, and I thought it was amazing. And actually, whenever I did that, so I know therapy can be very expensive, but I actually got really lucky and I was able to do that program for free through my university when I was in college. So definitely don't give up. Research the options that are available to you, and maybe there's something even more accessible than you think. So now that we're ending today's episode, I do want to leave you with a couple of questions, just questions for reflection. I recommend that you write these down in your journal and you journal on them a little bit, just so you can really gain clarity on these. But the first one is, how has self-love affected your business? Or if you don't have a business, how it's affected your professional life? Really understanding the role that self-love plays in your work life is going to be tremendously helpful to really getting the benefits of loving yourself and making sure that you're making loving decisions throughout your career, because that's what we want, right? And the second question I want to leave you with is, what self-love practices specifically make you feel the best? Which ones have been the most helpful to you? So for me, I've talked about this before, but I love journaling, okay? You might not. You might hate journaling, and that's okay. You can find ones that work the best for you and use those. Okay, so there's nothing that's really cut and dry about this. It's really personalized to you and what's going to make you feel good and help you grow. So now that we're winding down, I just want to reiterate, self-love is so crucial for succeeding in business, because it helps you make sound decisions. It helps you make empowered decisions. It helps you grow your business. And just overall, it weaves beautifully into your business by helping you make decisions that are best for the business, but also that are aligned with your lifestyle, your desires, the things that you want, and just building overall a beautiful life for yourself. Because again, life and business are so deeply intertwined. So when you grow in one area, it helps you grow in the other. If you've been listening to this episode, I really encourage you to embark on your own self-love journey. Find the things that work for you and just start cultivating a deeper sense of self-worth, worthiness, and really honoring your desires in this life, because we only get one, right? Unless you believe in reincarnation, which could be a thing. Who knows? Alrighty, so if you've listened this far, I just want to thank you for tuning in. And if you love this episode, I would absolutely love if you take a screenshot of this and share it to your Instagram story and just leave me a note about what your favorite tip was. Share it with your followers, your friends, your family, people that really need to hear this message and understand it. And if you love this episode, I would love if you would leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just leave me a comment on YouTube. Give me a little thumbs up and let me know what you thought of the episode. Alrighty, well, thank you for tuning in. And again, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave me a rating if you love this episode, and I will talk to you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in.